Kelechi's stomach turned with hunger, and the cries of his children echoed in his ears like a melody. He squatted in the shadows of his brother's farm, his heart pounding as he reached for the first tuber of yam. Each rustle of the leaves felt like a clap, each movement a betrayal of his desperation. But what choice did he have? Poverty had squeezed him dry, and hunger had become the only master he obeyed. "Just this once," he whispered, his voice trembling. "God, forgive me. My family needs this to survive." Kelechi's hands worked quickly. He dug into the soft earth, lifting a tuber of yam from its resting place. He wiped the dirt from its surface with his shirt, his mind racing with plans to get home before anyone noticed. But the stillness of the night betrayed him. "Who goes there?" came a sharp voice, loud and angry. Kelechi froze, the yam slipping from his grasp and thudding softly to the ground. He turned slowly, his breath caught in his throat. Emerging from the shadows was his elder brother, Obinna, holding a lantern in one hand and a rifle in the other. Obinna's face was like stone, his eyes glowing with an anger that could not be mistaken. "Kelechi?" Obinna's voice carried disbelief, hurt, and fury all at once. "What are you doing in my farm? At this hour?" Kelechi's throat went dry. He tried to speak, but the words clung to the walls of his mouth like they, too, were too afraid to face his brother. "Answer me." Obinna barked, stepping closer. I'm sorry, Obinna," Kelechi stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "The children, they haven't eaten in 2 days. I just needed something to feed them." "Feed them?" Obinna's laugh was cold, biting. "So, you come to steal from me? After all I've done for you? After all I've suffered on this land?" "It's not like that," Kelechi pleaded, stepping back. "I wasn't stealing. I was. Don't you dare lie to me." Obinna's voice roared through the night. "You think because we share the same blood, you can disrespect me like this?" Kelechi dropped to his knees, his hands raised in surrender. "Please, Obinna. Forgive me. I will pay you back. I will work for you. Just, don't be angry. My family is dying of hunger." But Obinna's fury had clouded his judgment. He pointed the rifle at Kelechi, his hands trembling with a mixture of anger and betrayal. "You think your excuses mean anything to me? This farm is my life, my sweat, my blood. Do you know how hard I've worked to keep it standing?" Kelechi shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "I know, Obinna. I know. But I didn't mean to hurt you. I was desperate. Desperate enough to steal. From your own brother." The silence between them stretched, thick and suffocating. Kelechi dared to crawl closer, hoping to touch the hem of his brother's trousers, hoping for a shred of mercy. But Obinna stepped back, his finger twitching on the trigger. "Don't come closer," Obinna warned. Kelechi stopped, his hands pressed together in prayer. "Obinna, please. I beg you. Don't let the devil win. Forgive me." For a moment, Obinna's anger seemed to waver, replaced by something softer, something human. But it was only a moment. The anger returned, stronger, fiercer, fueled by pride and hurt. "I warned you, Kelechi," Obinna growled. "I warned you never to step foot on my land without my permission. You thought I was joking." The rifle rose higher, aimed squarely at Kelechi's chest. "Obinna, no." Kelechi screamed, throwing himself to the ground. But it was too late. The sound of the gunshot tore through the night, scattering the quiet like broken glass. Kelechi felt the burning pain tear through his body as he collapsed onto the earth, clutching his chest. Blood spilled onto the soil, mixing with the dirt that had once given life to the yams he had sought to steal. Obinna stood frozen, his rifle still raised, his face a mask of horror as the realization of what he'd done began to sink in. "Kelechi," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Oh God, Kelechi. But Kelechi couldn't answer. His breaths came in short, as he stared up at the stars. Memories of his children's laughter filled his mind, their faces innocent and full of hope. He had only wanted to feed them. He had only wanted to be a good father. The last thing Kelechi saw before his eyes closed was Obinna dropping the rifle, falling to his knees beside him, and screaming into the night. But even in the pain, even in the betrayal, Kelechi's lips moved in a silent prayer before giving up the ghost. Kelechi's body lay still on the ground, his lifeless eyes staring into the night sky. Obinna's hands trembled as he crouched beside his brother, shaking him as though he could wake him up. "Kelechi, get up." Obinna's voice cracked, his heart pounding. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean to." But Kelechi didn't move. His chest no longer rose and fell, and the blood pooling beneath him told the undeniable truth. From the edge of the farm, another farmer, Okari, who had been hiding in the shadows, watching the entire scene unfold, gasped loudly. His legs felt weak, but fear drove him to action. "Obinna!" Okari screamed, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. "What have you done? You killed your brother." Obinna looked up, his face pale and stained with tears. "It's not what it looks like. I didn't mean to." But Okari wasn't waiting to hear explanations. He turned and ran, his feet pounding the earth as he headed straight for the village. "Obinna has killed Kelechi," he shouted at the top of his lungs. "Obinna killed his brother." The cries woke the sleeping village, and one by one, doors opened, lanterns were lit, and voices filled the air. "What is he saying? Obinna killed Kelechi?" Obinna remained kneeling by Kelechi's body, his mind a whirlwind of panic and regret. "What have I done?" he whispered to himself. His hands, stained with blood, trembled as he tried to think of what to do next. But it was too late for thinking. The first villagers arrived at the farm moments later. Among them were Maman Kechi and Chief Azubike, the village head. Their lanterns illuminated the grim scene, Kelechi's lifeless body sprawled on the ground and Obinna sitting beside him, his face twisted in guilt and fear. "Obinna, what madness is this?" Chief Azubike roared. "Why would you kill your own brother?" Obinna stammered, his voice shaky. "It wasn't on purpose. I didn't mean to. I was angry. He was stealing my yams." "Stealing yams?" Okari spat, stepping forward. "Is yam worth a man's life? Your brother's life?" The crowd grew larger as more villagers arrived, murmuring among themselves. Some were shocked, others angry, and a few whispered words of pity for Kelechi's wife and children. "Bring his wife here," someone shouted. "She must hear what happened." "No." Obinna protested, rising to his feet. "Don't tell her like this. I'll explain." But the crowd wasn't listening. They were already sending for Kelechi's wife, Ifeoma, who lived on the other side of the village. Minutes later, Ifeoma arrived, her wrapper tied tightly around her chest, her face a mask of confusion and worry. She held her youngest child in her arms, the baby crying softly. "What is going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why are people shouting Kelechi's name?" Nobody spoke at first. The villagers stepped aside, parting to reveal Kelechi's body lying on the ground. Ifeoma's eyes widened in horror, and her legs buckled beneath her. "No!" she screamed, collapsing onto her knees. "This cannot be. Kelechi, wake up! Wake up!" Her cries filled the air, raw and heart-wrenching. Obinna stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ifeoma, I didn't mean to. He was stealing. I just wanted to scare him." "Stealing?" Ifeoma's voice rose, filled with fury. She turned to Obinna, her eyes blazing. "He was stealing because we had nothing to eat. Because your brother's children were starving. And you killed him for that? Obinna fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry. I didn't think. I didn't mean for this to happen." But Ifeoma wasn't listening. She clutched Kelechi's body, shaking him as if her touch could bring him back. The villagers looked on, some weeping, others shaking their heads in disbelief. "Chief Azubike," Maman Kechi said, breaking the silence. "What do we do now? This is a terrible crime." Chief Azubike frowned, his face grave. "We will take Obinna to the elders. He must face judgment for what he has done." Two men stepped forward, grabbing Obinna by the arms. He didn't resist, his body limp as they led him away. The crowd followed, leaving Ifeoma behind with her children and the body of her husband. Finally, Chief Azubike spoke again. "Obinna will be banished from this village," he announced. "He will leave at dawn and never return. His land and property will be given to Ifeoma and her children to help them survive." The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement, others expressing their shock. Banishment was a harsh punishment, but it was seen as just for such a grave crime. Obinna's head hung low as the crowd began to disperse. He knew he deserved this fate, but the weight of his guilt felt heavier than any punishment the elders could give. As the first light of dawn broke over the village, Obinna packed his belongings and prepared to leave. He paused at the edge of the village, turning to look back one last time. The faces of his brother, Ifeoma, and the children he had orphaned flashed before his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though there was no one there to hear. With a heavy heart, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the rising sun, leaving behind the village, the farm, and the life he would never reclaim. And in the small hut where Ifeoma and her children lay grieving, the cries of a widow and her children echoed through the morning air, a painful reminder of the cost of hunger, pride, and unchecked anger. Thanks for watching. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on your notification to be notified whenever we post new video.